Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jai Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana 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 Jamuna Thira Vanachari Jamuna Thira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandanam Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunj Bihari Jai Jai Radha Madhava Kunj Bihari Jai Jai Radha Madhava Kunj Bihari Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bo Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Prabhuji Acharya Ashtotra Shata Shri Srimad Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Thakur Haridas Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Sham Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Nadi Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Ganga Devi Ki Jai Yamuna Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Rani Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Harinama Sankirtana Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Samsthapak Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Gau Premanande All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. I thought we could speak largely from Srimad-Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 5, texts 24 and 5. But the topic that I was asked to speak about was mercy. So that will be a dominant theme in whatever we have to say. So please repeat. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam tato jayamudirayet nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavat sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki Krishna swadhamopagate dharmajnanadibhisaha kalaunashtradrashamesha puranarko dhunoditaha. This is Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 5, text number 24. I'll just repeat the Sanskrit and we can read the translation commentary. Te mayyapeta khila chapaler bhake dante dhrita kriyanake nuvartani chakru kripan yadyapi tulya darshanaha sushrushamane munayolpa bhashini. Though the sages saw everything equally, they showed mercy to me, which I, though a boy, developed in sense control, gave up child's play and all agitation, became obedient, served attentively, and spoke little. Sorry? Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Maybe I'm dealing with Bhanu Swami's translation. Do we have this book available that I can read, or I'll just read it from the screen? Although they were impartial by nature, those followers of the Vedanta blessed me with their causeless mercy. As far as I was concerned, I was self-controlled and had no attachment for sports, even though I was a boy. In addition, I was not naughty, and I did not speak more than required. Purport. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. In the Bhagavad-gita, the Lord says, all the Vedas are searching after me. Lord Sri Chaitanya says that in the Vedas, the subject matters are only three, namely, to establish the relation of the living entities with the personality of Godhead, perform the relative duties in devotional service, and thus achieve the ultimate goal, back to Godhead. As such, Vedantavadis, or the followers of Vedanta, indicate the pure devotees of the personality of Godhead. Such Vedantavadis, or the Bhaktivedantas, are impartial in distributing the transcendental knowledge of devotional service. To them, no one is enemy or friend. No one is educated or uneducated. No one is especially favorable, and no one is unfavorable. The Bhaktivedantas see that the people in general are wasting time in false, sensuous things. Their business is to get the ignorant mass of people to reestablish the lost relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By such endeavor, even the most forgotten soul is roused up to the sense of spiritual life, and thus being initiated by the Bhaktivedantas, the people in general gradually progress on the path of transcendental realization. So the Vedantavadis initiated the boy, even before he became self-controlled and was detached from childish sporting, etc. But before the initiation, he, the boy, became more and more advanced in discipline, which is very essential for one who wishes to make progress in the line. In the system of varnashram dharma, which is the beginning of actual human life, one who wishes to make progress, small boys after 5 years of age are sent to become brahmacharis at the Guru's ashram, where these things are systematically taught to every boy, be he a king's son or the son of an ordinary citizen. The training was compulsory, not only to create good citizens of the state, but also to prepare the boy's future life for spiritual realization. The irresponsible life of sense enjoyment was unknown to the children of the followers of the Varnashram system. A boy was even injected with spiritual acumen before being placed by the father in the womb of the mother. Both the father and the mother were responsible for the boy's success in being liberated from the material bondage. That is the process of successful family planning. It is to beget children for complete perfection. Without being self-controlled, without being disciplined, and without being fully obedient, no one can become successful in following the instructions of the spiritual master. And without doing so, no one is able to go back to Godhead. Om Jnanatimarantasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaganaragunathan Vitamtam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sintho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Taptakanchana Gaudanki Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Nama. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It's been stated in the commentary by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur on this verse. He emphasizes the nature of mercy. And he says that these sages, they showed Narad mercy impartially. First they showed him mercy, and when, as a result of their mercy, he became situated in the bhakti process and eventually took initiation into the line of bhakti, then upon seeing his advancement, they gave him further mercy. So he wants to make this point that they had equal vision. In this material world, we find that people show mercy when they see that someone is favorable to their own purpose, and that they withhold mercy when they see that that person is not pleasing to them. So sometimes we show mercy and sometimes we don't show mercy. It's conditional. It's prejudice, we can say. So one should not see the mercy of these Bhaktivedantas in that way, because they first showed him mercy before he had even developed these good qualities. That's what Srila Prabhupada points out in his purport. Sometimes it's said that we speak of causeless mercy, and this is what we're talking about. When one is self-realized and impartial, he shows mercy without considering whether a person is qualified or not qualified. So there are two terms that he uses for this. He says, Kripa hi dvidha ganamai nirgunacha. That is to say that there is mercy that is affected by the three modes of material nature. That's ordinary material mercy. And then there's mercy that is beyond the modes of material nature. That's the mercy of these great souls. So that's one thing. The second thing he points out is that the first type of mercy is this he calls it gunamayi kripa, and that is that if they see some good qualities, then they show mercy. And if they see that good qualities are absent, they withdraw mercy. And if they see bad qualities, then they show hatred. This is because they're impelled by the material modes of nature. I shouldn't say they. What it really means is we, because we are in this situation. And if we see, the second type of mercy is that those who are beyond the influence of the material modes of material nature, they show mercy without any cause. That's why it's called causeless mercy. There's nothing that you can do that will precipitate that mercy. It's causeless. You can't control it. But that's our saving grace. It's a good thing you can't control it, because just like Prabhupada said, God has 10 hands. With your 2 hands, how much can you accept if God wants to give you something? And with your 2 hands, how much can you hold back if God wants to take something away from you? So mercy is a little bit like that. The self-realized souls see everything in the material world as the same. So Shukdev Goswami has said, Giriyo mumuchus toyam kvachinna mumuchus shivam. And this is a quote from the 10th canto. Yatha jnanamratam kale jnanino dadate nava. During the autumn season, the mountains sometimes release pure water and sometimes do not release pure water. I don't know about here, because in California we've been in a drought for some time. Are there any? Maybe there's water coming out of the mountains. I don't know. Anyway, and in the same way, experts in transcendental science sometimes give the nectar of transcendental knowledge and sometimes do not. This is from 10th Canto, chapter 20, text number 36. So in this way, sometimes these self-realized persons show mercy to some. Hardness of the heart caused by the gunas is destroyed and becomes soft by devotion to the Lord. And then mercy appears within our hearts. Shuddha sattva visheshatma prema suryang susamya bhak rushibhis chittamasranya krit asau bhava uchyate. This is from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.3.1. It's called bhava, that part of bhakti whose essence is samvit and hladini shakti, that is to say, the knowledge and bliss potencies of the Lord. It's one ray of the sun of prema that is soon to rise within the heart, and it softens the heart with desires to meet, serve, and exchange love with the Lord. He goes on to say that there are first 4 stages of bhakti should be understood here. Mercy of the devotees, that's the main thing. Then service to the devotees, faith in that process, and taking shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. Just to quote the original from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Satam Kripa, that's the first thing, the mercy of great souls. Mahat Seva, the service of the great souls. Shraddha, faith, and Guru Padashraya, the shelter at the lotus feet of a bona fide spiritual master. I'm going to go on to the next verse. Uchishtale pananamodito dvijaihi sakritsma bhunje tadapasta kilbishaha evam pravrittasya vishuddha chetasas tadharma evatma ruchih prajayate. Once only, by their permission, I took the remnants of their food, and by doing so, all my sins were at once eradicated. Thus, being fully engaged, I became purified in heart, and at the same time, the very nature of the transcendentalist became attractive to me. Prabhupada writes here, pure devotion is as much infectious, in a good sense, as infectious diseases. A pure devotee is cleared from all kinds of sins. The personality of Godhead is the purest entity, and unless one is equally pure from the infection of material qualities, one cannot become a pure devotee of the Lord. The Bhaktivedantas, as above mentioned, were pure devotees, and the boy became infected with their qualities of purity by their association and by eating once the remnants of the foodstuff taken by them. Such remnants may be taken even without permission of the pure devotees. There are sometimes pseudo-devotees, and one should be very much cautious about them. There are many things which hinder one from entering devotional service, but by the association of pure devotees, all the obstacles are removed. I should just interject here, that conversely, by the association of mundaners, all pure devotional service is removed. This is a problem. Therefore, it's said so many times throughout our scriptures, in so many ways. Asat Sangha Tyaga Ai Vaishnava Achar, when asked what is the characteristic of a pure devotee, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu immediately replied, he's someone who avoids the association of non-devotees. Similarly, Rupa Goswami, when he is summarizing his formulas for success in the science of Bhakti Yoga, anybody know the verse I'm thinking of? There are actually two of them in Upadeshamrita. Utsahan nishchayad dhairyat tat karma parvartanat sangatyagat satovritte. You cannot be satovritte, fixed in a pure life. Satovritti means the life of a pure person. You can't be fixed in that without giving up mundane association, bad association, kusanga, sangatyaga. Therefore it said, sangatyagat. Similarly, what's the next verse? The Atyahara prayashascha prajalpo niyamagraha janasangascha lolyamcha. So, again, this is called, in logic, this is called anvaya vyatireki vyapti. Pervasion that, covering both bases, as we say in English. You say something positively and you say the same thing negatively, and there's no way around it. There's no wiggle room here. This is the point. The instruction is very clear. It's unavoidable. Do something and don't do something. Just like we say, remember Krishna always and never forget Krishna. This is the same. Anvaya vyatireka bhyam, it's stated in the Chatushloki Bhagavatam. Positively and negatively, we have to approach the Supreme Lord. So this is the idea. Okay, so giving up the association is an important point that should not go without mentioning. So the neophyte devotee becomes practically enriched with the transcendental qualities of the pure devotee, which means attraction for the Supreme Personality of Godhead's name, fame, qualities, pastimes, etc. What are these again? Name, fame, qualities, pastimes, ityadi. To become enriched with the holy name, to become enriched by the Lord's fame, to become enriched in the qualities of the Lord, to become enriched by the Lord's pastimes. This is what we're talking about. Infection of the qualities of the pure devotee means to imbibe the taste of pure devotion always in the transcendental activities of the personality of Godhead. I was thinking about this actually when we read. Here Prabhupada wrote in the previous purport about getting the sense of spiritual life. This is what we're talking about. This transcendental state at once makes all material things distasteful. Raise your hand if you're tempted to go to McDonald's sometimes. Of course not. It's absolutely absurd in this assembly. You see? Some people have that problem because of their association. Karanam guna sangoasya. Or, what's another way? In chapter 2, what does he say? Sangat sanjayate. Yes. And similarly, sattvat sanjayate jnanam. That's not so well known. That's in the 11th canto. By sattva guna, by cultivating sattva guna, we develop, what does jnana mean? Knowledge. We translated it as knowledge because that's the easiest way to do so. It's a one-word translation, but actually a more accurate way to translate it is awareness. Awareness. Gyayate, to know, to be conscious. Tamal Krishna Goswami used to say, before you become Krishna conscious, you first have to be conscious. So that's sattva guna, because we know from Bhagavad-gita, the primary symptom of sattva guna is increased awareness. Increased awareness. Just like the sun illumines all things in this world. So when someone has all the gates of the body illumined with awareness, that person is in sattva guna. So that comes from practicing, cultivating deliberately certain things that are in sattva guna. This is also stated in the Bhagavatam. Until we have the kind of taste for and faith for this process of Shravanam Kirtanam that we're reading about, we have to very carefully cultivate sattva guna. And how do we do that? We do that by very carefully following the injunctions of the scriptures, all of them. This is called vidhi, yatha vidhi, vidhivat. Okay. After the elimination of all sins or obstacles on the path of devotional service, one can become attracted. Shall I read it again? After the elimination of all sins or obstacles. Raise your hand if you have no obstacles. How about sins? You don't have to raise your hand. But the point is here, after you eliminate these things, then you can become attracted, which implies that you can't become attracted until you eliminate those things. Therefore, anartha nivritti is one of the early stages. We'll talk more about that. So, one can have steadiness. That we know. It's explicit in the verses describing this continuum. Adau shraddha tata atha and yes, anartha nivritti syat, then nishtha. Therefore he writes, one can have steadiness and one can have a perfect taste. From nishtha comes ruchi. Yes, ruchi. This is exactly what's stated in the 11th canto verse that I mentioned a moment ago. That until one awakens this real ruchi, really sinless ruchi, deep ruchi, that's not an easy thing to do. So until that point, then one has to cultivate things that are in sattva guna by following the injunctions of the Shastras very carefully. Therefore Krishna says, Yes Shastra vidhimutstrijya vartate kamakarataha ityadi. You know this verse. Anybody who gives up the injunctions of the Shastras and works whimsically or foolishly, that person cannot expect three things. What three things? Nasukam, naparam gatim, and? Nasasiddhim avapnoti. Nasukam, naparam gatim. He doesn't get any kind of success, he doesn't get happy, and he doesn't get the supreme. You see? So it's very important. Therefore he says, Tasmat chastram pramanam te karya vyavastiti. You should understand what is to be done and what is not to be done on the basis of what the Shastra tells you to do and what not to do. That's called Vaidhi Bhakti, a life based on Vidhi, a life based on principle, we can say, in modern parlance. Okay, so one can, after the elimination of sins or obstacles on the path of devotional service, one can become attracted, one can have steadiness, and one can have perfect taste, one can have transcendental emotions. That comes after Nishtha, after Ruchi, after Asakti. What is it called? Bhava. And at last, one can be situated on the plane of loving service of the Lord. All these stages develop by the association of pure devotees. And that is the purport of this stanza. So, commenting on this verse, Sridhar Swami points out that with the permission of these Bhaktivedantas, the Narad Muni ate the remnants of rice that was stuck to their plates, and by that act he was freed from sins. And thereby, Tesham dharme parameshwara bhajane eva atmano manaso ruchi prajayate sma ityanusanga. The idea is, as a consequence, the taste for exclusive worship of the Supreme, that arose in his mind. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains it a little bit more elaborately. He says, after getting permission from them to do so, I ate one time some rice stuck to their dishes. By that, all obstacles to bhakti were destroyed. Tadapasta kilbisha. Having taken their food, I developed without effort bhakti in the form of hearing, chanting, and remembering the Lord continually. Having developed a tendency for bhakti after eating the devotees' remnants, which I inevitably developed a taste, ruchi, for hearing and chanting in the mind. His mind developed an attachment, that is to say. And this applies to every one of us, the same process. He said, now, by this verse, 5 stages of bhakti should be understood. Desire to worship, that means spriha. Bhakti, love. Anartha nivritti means the obstruction of all obstacles, nishtha, and ruchi. Now, we've named 9 things, 9 factors, 4 in the previous verse, 5 in this verse. Here's, we can note that, like the previous 4, these were first listed in Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on Srimad-Bhagavatam text 1, Canto 2, text number 21. What verse is that? We know it's divinity and divine service. That much we know, chapter 2. Text 21. I'll give you a hint. Bhidyate? Very good. Acha. Okay, we know it. Bhidyate hridaya grantish chidyante sarva sangshayaha kshiyante chasya karmani drishta evatmanishvare. Thus the knot in the heart is pierced, and all misgivings are cut to pieces. The chain of fruit of actions is terminated when one sees the self as master. I'm sorry, that's the wrong, there we go. Okay. So, he comments on this. We use passive voice in this verse, just as a grammatical note. Kshiyante chasya karmani. And he says the reason this is used is to indicate that it's not the main result or the main purpose, the main thing that we seek in bhakti. It just happens to be a fringe benefit, you can say, of bhakti. Thus, all doubts, such as thinking that the attainment is impossible, are destroyed. Samshaya. Sarva samshaya means all doubts. And as one of those doubts he mentions, asambhavanadi rupaha. Sometimes we think, oh, how can I ever become Krishna conscious? But even Rupa Goswami writes like this, or he quotes a verse like this. When I see the devotional service performed by the ancients, I just think in my mind, how can I ever approach their standard? Even when we look at our own parents, sometimes we think that, they're so much better than me in so many ways. We were talking about this the other night. It seems each generation inherits, a little bit less karma and gyan than the previous generation. Because Kali Yuga is like that. Everything is, Dharma jnanadi pisaha, along with karma and gyan, the Lord went back to his own abode, and it's been diminishing ever since. It's like the tank is empty and we're running on fumes. Anyway, so this might be a doubt that someone might have. And he says this kind of thing is destroyed. Having seen the Lord, who is the Atman, all karmas are destroyed. Drishta evatmanishware, having seen the Lord. This is the idea. Or the Lord, first being in the mind and then being seen directly, destroys all the karmas as well. That's another way he takes it. Sometimes the acharyas commenting on these verses, they give alternate explanations. So first he appears in the mind and destroys all your mental doubts. Then he appears in front of you and destroys every other problem. There's one doctor in Vrindavan. She's a very wise woman, Russian. I had to see her once. So she told me that we were talking about Krishna, as she does every time anyone comes to see her. You get not only your medicine, but you get some Krishna consciousness as well. So she told me that every time a patient comes to see her, she chats for a few minutes after discussing the problem, and she always asks them one question. She said, I'll give you a choice. You tell me which one you prefer. Choice number one, you have all your desires fulfilled in this world and no problems. You have plenty of money, you have enough prestige, you have friends, political support, you have everything that you want, good health, you name it, you've got it, and you're also Krishna conscious, and at the end of the life, you go back to Godhead. Does it sound pretty good? Then she says, I give them an alternative. Option number 2 is that Krishna can appear before you in 1 second and take you back to Godhead right now. Which one would you choose? She said that without exception, everybody chooses option number 1. You see? We're really not ready. We really don't have all of our doubts destroyed. We don't have all of our attachments nullified. We've got some things that we want to. My dear Lord, please let me surrender unto your lotus feet completely tomorrow. This is why in the Ramayana, I think I mentioned this already, Velukuri Krishna said, when Bhishma came to surrender to Ram, he said, please take me to Ram right now, because I'm a demon and I might change my mind any minute, you see? So this is an interesting thing. So anyway, first the Lord appears in the mind, and then he appears before us, and all the sarva samshaya, all the kshiyanti chasya karmani. Kshiyanti, what does kshiyanti mean? How does Prabhupada translate it? Terminated. Yeah, it actually means minimized. That's interesting. To minimize something. But anyway, then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur quotes a very interesting verse at the end of his commentary. It's his own verse. He wrote it. He says, Satam kripa mahat seva shraddha guru padashrayah bhajaneshu spriha bhaktir anartha bhagamastatha nishtha ruchi ratha sakti rati prematha darshanam harir madhuryanubhava ityartha syush chaturdashe. 14 things should occur. The mercy of the devotees, that's the first thing. Second, the service of those devotees. Third thing, faith. 4, surrender to the Guru. 5, desire to worship the Lord. Bhajaneshu spriha means aspiration for bhajan. Bhakti, the clearance of anarthas. Fixity or nishtha, a real taste. Ruchi, asakti, attachment. Addiction even, Prabhupada used this word quite often for asakti. Rati, that's bhava. Prema, that's pure love of Godhead. Seeing the Lord, darshanam, and experiencing the Lord's sweetness, harirna madhuryanubhava. These things should happen. Now, how in the world are we going to make all these things happen? I've given you a hint. You've heard enough already that you should have some idea by now. I would like to just pause for a moment and just relish this goal in the form of a song written by Srila Rupa Goswami. Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande. It's a Sanskrit song, which one of our many musicians here in ISKCON, Silicon Valley, can render into music one day, we hope. Manmana samadhupakaram arpaya nijapada pankaja makarande. That means, O Lord Krishna, I offer my obeisances unto you. Please fix my bee-like mind in the nectar of your lotus feet. Yadyapi samadhishu vidhirapi pashyati natava nakhagramichim idam ittami nishamya tavachat tadapi kripad bhutavichim. O Achyuta, although the great Lord Brahma, in his trance of samadhi, is unable to see even a particle of the effulgence emanating from the tips of the nails of your lotus feet, still, I desire this vision. Is everybody's attention riveted on the screen right now? Or are you listening? Because it is distracting. And he's not going to find it. At least not before I finish the song. Okay, now we've got the Sanskrit. Let's keep scrolling. All right. Okay, let's see if we've got the same translation now. Otherwise, people become further distracted. All right. Yeah, it looks like it's a different translation. Sorry. You're going to have to listen to me instead. Bhakturu danchati yadyapi madhava natvaye mamatila matri. Parameshwarata tarapitavadhik durghata ghatana vidatri. So beautiful. O Madhava, although my devotion for you does not come forth even a tiny bit. How much is a tiny bit? Tila matri. What's tila? Sesame seed. Even I don't have a sesame seed of devotion. Parameshwarata tarapitavadhika durghata ghatana vidatri. Because you are the Supreme Lord, you're able to accomplish impossible things. You can make the impossible thing happen, and this is impossible. Did we read this song by Vidyapati here last week? No. You want to hear it? Yes. His very nice, beautiful bhajan by Vidyapati in Maithili language. Old song. This is before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu even. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to listen to his songs. Similarly, he prays to Madhava. Who is Madhava? Husband of? Ma. Who's Ma? Amma. Yes. Just like when you go to Sri Rangam, you get Periyamma. Big mother. Who is that? Lakshmi Devi. So the husband of the goddess of fortune. So he says, Madhava, Bahuta minati karitai. I'm praying ardently before you. He says, Dei tulasi tila deha samarpino. I'm offering you myself, just as a small tulsi leaf, as it were. Tila, same word as he's using. Dei tulasi tila deha samarpino. What is the last? Every day I sing this song. I can't forget it in a different context. You've got it. Dayajani na charabi more. But I know that your mercy, I know you won't neglect me, he says. Ganai te dosa gunalesnana pausi. If you examine me for qualities and faults, you'll find that I have only flaws, no qualities. Jab tuhu karabi bichar, tuhu Jagannatha, Jagate kahausi. Everybody in the world is calling you Jagannath. Jagabahir nahi moi chhad. Don't leave me out of that universe. I'm also part of your universe. You have to accept me. Then he says, Kiye manusha pashu pakhi jay janamiye. I may take birth again as a human being, or maybe as an animal, or maybe as a bird. Athava kita patange, even as a flying insect. But karma vipake, gata gati punah punah. Again and again, in accordance with the fruition of my chain of karmas, I blow it again and again. Every time I'm going through this birth and I keep messing up and losing this opportunity. Mati rahu tua parasange, but at least let my mind be fixed on you, in connection with you. Bhanaye vidyapati atishayakatra. Vidyapati prays, overwhelmed with shame and depression. He says, Taraite iha bhavasantu. Take me out of this ocean of repeated birth and death. Tua para pallava karyavadambana tila ek dehadina bandhu. Taking shelter of your lotus feet. I take shelter of your lotus feet. After all, this body is really, it's simply an insignificant tulasi leaf. Oh dear Dina Bandhu, please consider my prayer. So Rupa Goswami is similarly, he's praying like this. Parameshwarata tarapi tavadhika durghata ghatan vedatri. You can do anything impossible, so I'm taking shelter of you. I am avilola tayadya sanatana kalitad bhutarasa bharam nivasato nityamihamrita nindati vindan madhurimasaram. That means, O Sanatan, Krishna, or you can read this as an address to his older brother. Who is Rupa Goswami's older brother? Sanatana Goswami. So he's praying to both Krishna and the devotee. Your lotus feet surpass even the nectar of the gods. Finding in this lotus flower of your lotus feet the essence of all sweetness, which is endowed with truly wonderful mellows, I pray that today the bee of my mind may eternally reside there. So, we're reading about Narad Muni's experience. Why is Narad Muni relating this experience? Huh? Vyasdev. Vyas was despondent, right? But we were also despondent. Atishaya Katara, maybe, worse than despondent. So, how in the world are we going to get through these stages that we mentioned, these 14 stages? Shall I read them again? In Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, he lists them. Satam kripa mahat seva shraddha guru padashraya. We can do that much. Bhajaneshu spriha bhakti anartha apagama, that's destruction of the anarthas. Nishtha, ruchi, asakti, rati, prema, darshana, and harer madhuryanubhava. These 14 things Vishwanath Chakravarti's talk is mentioning in his purport on this verse about Narad Muni. So the point is that if we have faith and we invest our faith in proper association, adav shraddha tata sadhu sangha, in that sadhu sangha we will be engaged in bhajana kriya, and certain things will happen. All these things, faith will be increased, guru padashraya will occur naturally. Really, it's all about associating with devotees. Therefore, we hear it's described in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Sadhu Sangha, Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Shastra Kai, Lava Matra Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Siddhi Hoy. All these are only 14 perfections, but he says all perfections are coming. Remember what happens if you don't follow the vidhis? You don't get three things. No perfection, no happiness, no Supreme Personality of Godhead. And if you associate with devotees, you get all perfection. You get, of course, you get happiness as well. You get the Supreme Perfection. Now, there's a beautiful metaphor in one old Brij Pasha book. The effect of associating with devotees in our progressive cultivation of bhakti is described very nicely in a poem in a medieval book called Bhakti Rasa Bodhini by Priya Das. Priya Das was a poet in the line of the Radharaman Goswamis, disciple of, who was it? Anyway, in that line from Gopal Bhatta Goswami. So, this is called Satsang Prabhav Varnan, description of the power of Satsanga. He says, Bhakti taro paudha tahi vikna dara chedi hunkao bari debi chara bari sincho satsanga son lagyoi badhana gonda chahun dishi karhana so charhana akasha jasha phailyo bahuranga son Sant ura ala bala sobhita visala chaya jiye jiva jala tapa gaye yon prasanga son देखो बढ़ोवारी जाहि आज हूँ की शंका होती ताही पेड़ बांधे झुलाएं हाथी जीते जंगसों. That means the tree of faith. Faith is a tree. So the tree of faith was but a sapling that might be stunted by a single kid. What's a kid? Not your children. This is Old English. This translation is at least 100 years old. Nobody's a native speaker of English here. Baby goat, that's exactly right. So when we have a tree that's just a sapling, we put a fence around the tree to protect it from goats. Once in Vrindavan, I looked out my window and I saw that the neighbor had planted nice flowers all in the front yard, and there were nothing to protect those flowers. So one morning I looked out the window and saw half a dozen baby goats all chewing away very contentedly, each on his own plant. And within 10 minutes, the whole garden was completely destroyed. But your devotional service is like that also. This is why Prabhupada always told us that advance, push through this process of anartha nivritti so that you can get out of kanishta adhikar and at least into the madhyama adhikar. Madhyama adhikar means there's enough of a stem on this tree that the goats either they can't reach it or they don't want to chew it. You see? That's what has to happen. You see? Little goats. So, the tree of faith was but a sapling that might be stunted by a single kid. It was given the fence of, what is your fence made out of? Discrimination. That is Madhyam Adhikar status. The key word of Madhyam Adhikar is discrimination. You have to discriminate. Nowadays we think discrimination is a bad word because in America everybody's supposed to be equal opportunity, equal everything, But actually everybody discriminates anyway, it's just secret. Therefore, it's cheating, ultimately. That's another matter. Okay, so the fence that will protect your, Komala sapling is discrimination. It's the only thing. And that you get from studying the books, Srila Prabhupada's books. Therefore we say, Guru Mukha Padma Bhakku Chitete Koriya Aikya Aharana Kori Hamani Asha. Just fix your mind on the instructions of the spiritual master and don't divert to anything else. That will protect your sapling of bhakti. So, it was given the fence of discrimination and sprinkled with the water of satsanga. Sincho satsanga song. It was sprinkled with the water of satsanga. It began to wax great. What does that mean? This is archaic English again. It means it started to grow big, became a big tree. And branches and twigs did it put forth on every side. It climbed to the sky, and its glory spread manifold over the earth. For the basin from which its roots drew moisture was the bosom of the holy. Satsanga. From satsanga, it drew everything that it required, everything needed. The water, everything. All things that live found coolness and drew fresh life beneath it. In India, you know, especially just before the rainy season starts, you really value trees that give shade. Sometime when I left Vrindavan a month or two ago, it was 45 and rising. That's Celsius, not Fahrenheit. Here in America, we're backwards. Everyone else in the world uses Celsius, pretty much. Okay. Mark well its growth. Once it was a feeble thing, for whose sake we feared a small goat. Now, shackled to that wondrous tree, contentedly sway mighty war elephants. See the power of satsanga, all from satsanga only. You can tie an elephant to that tree, and that elephant is not going anywhere. How strong is an elephant? Those from South India maybe know. Anybody here from Kerala? Once I was in Padayatra. We were only in Andhra Pradesh, but still they were using elephants then. This is 1984, 85. You don't see elephants so much anywhere anymore, but so we were walking down the road and there was an elephant on the Padayatra. What do elephants do for sport? They're like goats. They don't eat gardens, they just like to trample through them. So this elephant came and curled his trunk around a tree, and he pulled the whole tree out and just threw it over to the side of the road. I saw it happen, a tree. See? But this tree is a different thing. This tree has been strengthened by good association, fenced in the beginning with good association, watered with good association. It grew, it became a massive tree, and you tie a mighty elephant, not only an elephant, but a war elephant, an elephant that's used to pushing and pulling and fighting. And he's not going anywhere. So this is satsanga. Now, one of those 14 qualities that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has mentioned in the end of his commentary on text number 25 is Mahat Seva. So there's a nice verse in the 5th canto. Anybody know about this? Mahat Sevam Dvaram Ahuri Muktehe. They say that the doorway to liberation is this Mahat Seva. Mahat Seva. And what is the double value of Mahat Seva? According to chapter 2 of Srimad-Bhagavatam, divinity and divine service. Shradhanasya Vasudeva Katharuchi Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipra Punya Tirtane Shevarat. You see, Shushru. This is one of the things as well. To be Shushru, to be eager to hear. Generally nowadays in modern languages, Hindi mein iska matlab kya hai Shushru? Utsuk also, yeah, you can say, but generally we talk like somebody who's a little bit chumchy, right? He's like, oh, yes. Yeah. But actually, Shushru, technically in Sanskrit, what does it mean? He really, really wants to hear. Shru means to hear. Shu. He really wants to hear. Desiderative, intensive. This verb is called an intensive verb. Really wants to hear. And if you really want to hear, then you will really want to serve, because that's where you get the taste. If you really want to hear, then this is how you do it. Otherwise, if you're not ready to serve, then, when the Guru comes, everybody shows up. Hundreds of them. Oh, Haribol, and then they disappear. That's not right, you see. Such persons are not, they're not realizing the value of good association. So, mercy is causeless. When we come in contact with those who are really pure devotees, they will always be merciful to us because that is their very nature. It's just natural for them. It would be artificial for them not to be merciful. So what can we do? Sometimes it seems, just like Bali Maharaj, it seemed like something that he did kind of like invoked the Lord's mercy, isn't it? What did he do? He surrendered. But after he surrendered, what did the Lord do? He tied him up. But ultimately he gave him his place, and the Lord became his doorkeeper. But actually this mercy is causeless. There's nothing that we've done to invoke it. We're utterly dependent on the Lord's mercy. We can't bring it about by anything. There's nothing we can do. It's His nature to be merciful, but we just have to wait patiently and try to execute the process of devotional service. If there is any way to invoke His blessings, this is what it is. Actually, there's a story about this. It's one of those apocryphal stories, but it's very entertaining, and it's instructive also. Akbar. So one time Akbar is alleged to have come to visit Vallabhacharya, famous Vaishnava preacher. So he said, "How can I see Sab? I want to see God." And Vallabhacharya said, "No, actually there's no way that you can, only when He gives you mercy then you can come. But if there is a way," what is it? Humility. What is that you have as your signature on your email, no? What does it say? जोर से बोलिए. An intelligent person. Yeah.
An intelligent person should have words, actions, and behavior that fixes him in utter humility, and anything else he should reject.
Very nice. That's from Brihad Bhagavatam. Elsewhere in that same book, Sanatana Goswami defines Krishna Prema. How does he define Krishna Prema? Anybody remember? Absolute, unconditional humility. They're one and the same thing. Therefore, the importance of this verse that we have, Tranada Pisunichena, Tororivasishnana, Amanina Manadirna, Kirtaniya Sadahari. How profound is it? So simple, deceptively simple, and very difficult to practice, but very simple. Therefore, Krishna consciousness is very easy in the sense of simple, but it's not easy if we are infected in our hearts. So the best way to remove all these infections is association with devotees. That is the most merciful situation to be in. Abadda Karuna Sindhu Nitai Katya Mahan. Nityananda broke open the dike, you can say, holding in Bengal you have these rice fields, they're full of water and there's a thin wall of mud between them. So he just kicked it over and let all the water come out. That water is mercy. Not just a field of mercy, but an ocean of mercy. Nityananda. And this Nityananda, he invested his Shakti in his divine grace, whom we know as Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada brought these books to all of us, and he taught us by his example. That's the best kind of teaching. And he gave us this Mahamantra. And how many gifts shall we enumerate? 64 angas of bhakti, but he gave us every single one of them. So, that is mercy. That is the causeless mercy. We weren't looking for it. Either we were born here out of sinful actions in the past, or we came here with the base motives of finding something else. But while we all slept, or maybe before we were born, Srila Prabhupada was working hard to write these books and planning the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, such that when he got the opportunity, everything came together like that, because Krishna was working through him. Nitai was working through him. So we're all mercy cases. We say there's sadhana siddha, kripa siddha, nitya siddha, but actually every one of us is kripa siddha, even the sadhana itself. Guru kripa bina nahi koi sadhan bal. The bhajan is there. Without the spiritual master's blessings, you can have very good sadhana, but it's not going to have any potency. So, all right, it's getting late. I should probably stop here. Does anybody have any questions or any comments? Yes, Navina Nirada Prabhu. Microphone.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mukunda Datta Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
There's a twofold question. One is, there's the statement that association only happens if there's the 6 types of loving exchanges. Otherwise, it's not classified as association. So somebody might take that as an excuse that, okay, I can be with whoever as long as these 6 things don't take place. It's not strictly classified as association, so I won't really be affected by that. If you could elaborate on that. And the second part is, here in this verse, most of us, we have taken Mahaprasad, Mahamahaprasad, we have taken so much remnants.
Let me deal with one thing at a time, because otherwise it'll be hard. Dadati pratikrihnati guhyam akhyati pritchati bhunkte bhojayate chaiva shadvidham priti lakshanam. I'm not sure I'm convinced of that, because Sangha and Priti Lakshanam are 2 different things. These are the symptoms of love shared by one devotee and another. There are 2 ways always that we can approach any Shastric reference. One is to see it as an exclusive injunction, and the other is to see it as an inclusive injunction. And I don't see a reason to interpret this particular verse as the only way to associate. We can say that these are the characteristic ways that devotees associate, but why is it exclusive? That's my question.
The example, the statement is given that you may go to the marketplace and purchase something, or be in your job, or any type of activity. Unless these 6 specific functions happen, it's not actually considered intimate association, even though there is physical proximity.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but then one may take that as a license and engage in these type of melas or associations. The point I'm trying to make is there's always some backwash, no matter what type of association we're having with non-devotees. So what should be our attitude, because we may be forced in our field of work, in our field of preaching, in our field of whatever service, non-devotee association is practically unavoidable.
Yeah.
Outside of maybe a few fortunate holy places. So what should be the attitude of a devotee who has to face this on a daily basis?
Well, my answer to that question really depends on my definition of Sangha, and I have a very broad definition of Sangha. Sangha, samyak gacchati, means everything going together as a gestalt, as it were. What you're hearing, what you're seeing, what you're touching, what you're tasting, smelling, feeling, and who you're with as well. It's not just impersonal. That's I think, the point that you're making. Priti Lakshanam would definitely be, that's correct. You're not really having intimate association with devotees until you're doing those things. That we can argue. We hear at the same time that even 1/11th of a second association with the devotee, it's hard to imagine how you can do any of these 6 things in 1/11th of a second, but I suppose it's possible. So, what I would say is that the potency of the devotee also makes a big difference. If someone just sees Srila Prabhupada, that can change their lives. And there are many devotees who can say that just by seeing him, they were attracted to Krishna consciousness. So, on one level, we can say that the association should mature and expand, maybe deepen, and include these 6 exchanges at some point for sure. There's no argument about that. But I'm still not convinced that it's necessary to qualify as satsanga. Because there's sadhu sangha, which is personal association, and there's satsanga, which is not necessarily personal, but still elevating. The words are used interchangeably, it's true. But, we find again and again, there are circumstances in which a person just gets some remnants of food without even meeting the devotee, or maybe touches a book. Prabhupada said his whole life can be changed. That has to be considered. It's certainly not a satsanga, but it's not necessarily sadhu sangha either. At least it's not personal association. I don't know if I'm answering your question or if it's satisfactory.
Yes, thank you. As far as this verse goes...
Is this the second half now?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I get a second shot. We've taken Mahaprasad, Mahamahaprasad. In my case, I have to say, I don't really can perceive that all my sins have been eradicated. I'm still facing different types of reactions and different types of scenarios. So, could you say something on that?
Mm-hmm. I can say something very interesting about that. The question is raised by Jiva Goswami in his Durga Sangamani commentary on Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu. We often hear the word sadhya, sadhyo hridya varudhrite. What is it? In the second verse of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. Yes. Sadhya, he's immediately, relieved of all the contamination, or immediately he becomes qualified to perform Vedic sacrifices just by chanting the holy name, etc. Immediately, sadhya. So Jiva Goswami raises the question that, what does this actually mean? Because we can see that a person who is supposedly immediately purified of all sinful reactions still undergoes suffering sometimes. Still he gets sick, or sometimes, has to die a horrible death even. Devotees, these things happen. There's one famous devotee that Prabhupada mentions in his Nectar of Devotion, Lala Babu. Anyone who has been to Vrindavan, Lala Babu temple is near Ranganathji temple. Krishna Chandrama, I think the deity's name is. Very beautiful temple, and he was fabulously wealthy. This is, I think, during the Hastings administration. Very, very wealthy man. He was practically like Ambani's or something. Wealthiest, certainly the wealthiest man in East India at the time. That's undoubted. So, but he became a devotee, and that's another story that's very interesting, but we don't have time for it, how he became a devotee. But somehow or other he gave up everything and went to Krishna, and went to Vrindavan to surrender to Krishna. And he was dressing very simply and living very simply in Vrindavan, worshipping Krishna. And he even went to the homes of his former political and business rivals, and he would beg from them to build temples. Whatever wealth he had, he invested in the holy Dham. He bought so much of the Vrajamandala Dham just to preserve it, because he could see with the British in charge, there's no guarantee of anything. Kind of like Vasudev didn't really trust Kamsa. So, he spent his whole life in this piety. But how did he leave the planet? One day when he was at Govardhan, he was kicked in the head by a rearing horse. Very violent death. So, sometimes these things happen. So one can ask him, is it karma, or is this the way Krishna treats his devotees, or what is it? So Jiva Goswami says, sadhya means immediately, but we have to understand that time is relative. We have our conditional concept of time, and for us immediately means it's got to be at least 1/11 of a second. He gives this analogy, which I'll ask you a rhetorical question about this. If you stack 100 pan leaves, you all know from India, Mataji knows, the garlands that you make, the needles that you use to make garlands, the long ones. If you push that through a stack of 100 leaves, pan leaves, it goes through it pretty much immediately, correct? Absolutely. No. Jiva Goswami says no. He says it goes first through the 100th leaf, then through the 99th leaf, then through the 98th leaf, then through the 97th leaf, 96, 95, adi, until you get to the end. So from our perspective, it looks to be immediate, but that's because we're conditioned by a karmic conception of time that is specific to our karmic, individual karmic, or even collective karmic configuration. It's a relative human concept. Demigods are seeing something in a completely different level of time. Insects are seeing it in a completely different way. For them, it's very different. So it's not necessarily from our conditional perspective that we immediately become freed from our karma. Is that helping to answer your question? Rasika, you have? You need a microphone? I don't think so. Lekin Jor se bolo. Oh, it's Vrindavan's question. Oh, okay.
Well, you said that association is very important in our lives. And I was just thinking about how you inspired me to do deity worship when you would bathe your own Gopal in the Govardhan Shilas. And I learned that how association can bring a great impact in your lives.
Thank you. Practical application. Example is better than precept. We can talk, but people actually respond to what you're doing. Every parent knows. Even though we know, it's hard to set the example. It's much easier just to give an instruction. And you have to do it. Someone over here had a question also. Yes.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for such an enlightening discourse. Prabhu, I had a question regarding the anecdote you mentioned about the doctor in Vrindavan who asks gives these two options. First one being everything goes well in this world, no problems, and at the end Krishna comes and takes you back. And second one, Krishna comes this very second. So, somehow impulsively the answer came, given that we are practicing devotional service, the answer came that, maybe second option. But if we carefully analyze our lives, then after some deep contemplation, we can feel, maybe I am in the first option. The first option holds true for me. So how do we recognize these factors that the symptoms of, actually I fit in the first option? How do we see these symptoms in our life and how do we work on them and come to the second option?
What you just said reminds me of something that Shachinandan Maharaj said at the Sadhu Sangha retreat this year. He said, when we speak about surrender, new devotees become very enlivened. Yes, let's surrender. He said, old devotees become a little bit fearful. So yes, we should hopefully recognize our appropriate category. But how do we approach? How do we approach the ideal? I think it should be clear. I would hope that we've helped to clarify, at least to some degree, that by associating with devotees, associating means, well, there's a qualification given here. Sajati ashaya snigdha. Association with more advanced devotees who are like you. Both those conditions have to be met, according to Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Because if you associate with someone who is more advanced, but with whom you cannot even begin to relate, then it's very difficult. It's hard to really get very far like that. On the other hand, if you find someone with whom you can relate, but that person's faith is not deeper than yours, then that's also a problem, because then it ends up, association means watching cricket match together. You see? So We have to find someone whose faith is deeper than ours, someone who is like us, with whom we can relate, and with whom we can feel comfortable taking guidance. But that person's faith has to be deeper than ours, because the definition or the defining characteristic of the more advanced devotee is the depth of faith. We've talked about Kanishta Adhikaris, Madhyama Adhikaris, and Uttama Adhikaris. The neophyte, the intermediate and advanced devotees, but they're only really distinguished by the level of their faith, the degree or the depth, I should say, of their faith. So we have to associate with devotees who are deeper in their faith than us. And the closer they are to us in other ways, then the more easily the transmission of spiritual inspiration and guidance and knowledge and purification will take place. Just what you're saying reminds me that about what this Russian woman was offering people, or at least suggesting. Sometimes we find in the Shastra that if you chant this prayer or if you read this narration from the Bhagavatam, then you will have all material happiness and plus go back to Godhead. Now, I live in Vrindavan, which by some estimation can be considered the spiritual world, living in the spiritual world. It's salokya mukti, if you will. So there's a cow who lives across the street from me, and her name is Saraswati. And the nature of life in rural India, not in Noida, not in Gurgaon, not in Bangalore, not in Delhi, not in Chennai, I think, although some of you can confirm. The life of modern urban India is not like that. But in rural India, when you have leftover vegetables, it's no problem. You just give it to the cow, she's quite happy. So all day long, people from the MVT compound are going to feed this cow Saraswati, who's a very stout cow and a very happy cow. So just think about it. She has all material sense gratification, and she's a devotee, and she's living in the Dham, and she's going back to Godhead. So think about it carefully next time you see one of those Falashrutis, if you catch my drift. Yes.
So Prabhuji, you talked about the three modes of material nature. So I had a question on that. If you take the example of the Pandavas, they were always engaged in activities of Kshatriya, and so it is said that they are predominantly into mode of passion. But here in our discussion we were reading that one should get to the sattva gun. So my question is related to that. How do we correlate Pandavas, whether in sattva gun or they were in rajagun, or what exactly?
Well, the different varnas are characterized like this. We say the Shudras and less, they're more or less in tamoguna. The Vaishyas are mixed tamoguna with rajaguna. Kshatriya is primarily rajaguna, Brahmins primarily sattvaguna. Of course, these are not hard and fast distinctions. There's always a mixture of the three modes. Just like three primary colors. Yellow means sattva, red means passion, blue means ignorance. But we mix those three primary colors and we get the secondary colors. 3 times 3 is, 9 times 9 is, 81 times 81 is. You get the idea. The world is a complicated place. It's not so easy to simplify like that. Now, when we introduce the principle of pure devotion on top of that complication, then it becomes a little bit touchy to understand, because a person who is a devotee of Krishna can offer everything to the Lord in devotional service. In fact, this is the very thing that he asks for in Bhagavad-gita. Sve sve karmani abhirata samsiddham labate naraha. Anyone can attain perfection by performing his duty, but in devotional service you can go all the way back to Godhead by that. Ordinarily you have to be coming to the mode of sattva guna ityadi. But in bhakti yoga it's a little bit different, because through purification of our hearts, which means purification of our motives, which means transcending the influence of these three modes of material nature, we come to the level of shuddha sattva, Shuddha Sattva, transcendental goodness. So bhakti is actually, its substrate is that Brahmabhuta realization, which is beyond even Sattva Guna, actually. Is that clear? You can act as if in the mode of passion, Srila Prabhupada writes in Chaitanya Charitamrita, but you should not actually be impelled by the mode of passion, because if you're impelled by passion, you won't be able to continue this austerity.
Yeah. So we are also working in this place of Ugra Karma and activities of Shudra, and so that was the follow-up thing.
At least you realize it. Many people, I mean, they don't even see that much.
Yeah. So it's so if I compare, we devotees are like Vibhishan in the Lanka, that kind of situation. So, so how do we come to Sattva Gun or become devotees?
We've been saying all throughout the class that sadhu sangha sarva siddhi hoy. No? By sadhu sangha, everything about bhakti, everything that is auspicious in bhakti, it is all affected through sadhu sangha. Ek doha hai bhi ki bina satsanga na hari katha, you know this one? Bina mohana bhaga, moha gai, binu ramapada, hoyana dridham raga. It's the same idea. It has to be association is there. That will do everything. Prabhupada said association is 90% of our advancement. But keep in mind that it's, what are you associating with? Is your association exclusive? Is it mixed? How much is it mixed? You have to be introspective to that degree. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you, bro.
Okay, in the corner, all the way in the back.
Thank you, Maharaj, for wonderful class. I just thought to remind you, if you could complete your story about Balvacharya and Akbar.
No, I did. He said that if there is a way, it's humility.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, that was the point. Sorry. Anything else? Okay, all the way this side, in the back.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. So, my question is regarding offering. Like when Krishna tells Arjuna that whatever you do, you offer it to me. And Arjuna was a warrior. So, when he is fighting, he has to think strategically and use his mind in the science of warfare. Then, how is that? How does it go simultaneously with consciously offering the activity of fighting to Krishna as well? So, is it the mind is engaged in the specifics of the warfare because he has to think when he fights, and also has to offer the activity to Krishna. So this is a thing that is encountered by most of us when we do something that is ritualistic but also requires conscious effort in it, and also Krishna needs to be in the consciousness if we were to be Krishna conscious. So how do we resolve this?
How do we specifically think of Krishna and perform our duty at the same time, I think is the essence of your question, no?
Yes, perform the duty which requires us to
it requires external awareness.
Yeah.
There was one devotee in the early days of ISKCON who got the bright idea that I'm not going to think of anything mundane. So he got one of these stands that you put around your neck that holds like a harmonica or something. And instead he put a picture of Krishna there so that he could not see anything. And he was constantly chanting and just only seeing this picture of Krishna all the time. That person is no longer doing that. So, enough said. No, what we have to do is purify the intentions with which we're performing our activities. Think of it this way. A man works hard, not just 40 hours a week anymore. Everybody works more than that. But why is he doing it? He's thinking about his family. He's thinking about her. He's thinking about the children. He's thinking about his goals. He's thinking about the promotion or whatever fruitive inspiration you can say he has. But a devotee of Krishna replaces that desire through chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. As much as possible, chanting like that. A devotee replaces that fruit of intention with a loving intention to only please Krishna, and more specifically and more practically to please his pure devotee, the spiritual master. When love for the spiritual master is awakened, love for Krishna is awakened thereby, and all these other things pale by comparison, as we were reading. Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhu.
We can continue to write programs or whatever it is that we do. That requires a certain amount of dedicated awareness, but it's the intention that counts. And we're working under the guidance, under the sponsorship of a bona fide spiritual master, and then that activity will be dovetailed in Krishna service. You can read around the middle of chapter 12 of Bhagavad-gita, Krishna lists all the different options, the different plans, you can say, for devotional service. The best thing is just to become instant Paramahamsa, but most people can't do that. So, you follow plan B, plan C, plan D, ityadi. Okay? Anything else? If not, then, Harivamsha Prabhu. I have time, it's up to you.
Thank you, Prabhu, for a very nourishing class. Vishnu Chakri Thakur mentions, I think in Madhura Kadamni, that only Uttam Adhikari the bhakti doesn't come from Uttam Adhikari, he has to come to the level of Madhyam Adhikari, and then the bhakti is there. But then Madhyam Adhikari has to make discrimination. That's his quality. So I'm just asking this question, how to understand this, that mercy or the bhakti is causeless, because a Madhyam Adhikari has to make discrimination. And also in this light, as preachers, when we go out, of course we don't
That's one question, and this is another question, right? Okay, so let me take one at a time, because I can't keep track. The thing is that the mercy of a devotee, Uttama Adhikari or Madhyama Adhikari, it's causeless. It's not that because he has to make distinctions among different classes of people that he's giving mercy to them because they're in those classes. It's causeless. But he understands that if I give mercy to this person, it's just going to make the person more envious. You don't feed milk and bananas to a serpent, because the snake will just become more poisonous, you see. And similarly, we don't, he has to discriminate who is going to receive this appropriately and who isn't. But in some ways, we can give it to everyone. Harinam we can give to everyone. Books we can give to everyone. There's no question of calculating who's going to respond favorably and who's not, if they take it. But therefore, we shouldn't be surprised when certain people don't take it. But even then, we find that there are so many strange events. Any Sankirtana devotee knows. Sometimes the people seem to be the most impious, unlikely candidates for Krishna consciousness, but they end up surrendering more than we do. How does it work? It's causeless. It's causeless. There's no calculating it. Is that okay? The mercy as causeless means that even though we have to use some discrimination to organize our practical activities, but that doesn't mean that our attempt to deliver mercy is depending on that or is caused by that, you see. That's an important point. It's causeless. Nirupadhika kripa, he calls it. Nirupadhika. It's not something you can categorize. Is that okay?
Thank you. That answers second part too.
Okay, second part, yeah. That answers the second part. Okay. So I think time's up. Do we go to 8 or 8:30? 8 o'clock. So then, thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Yeah.